Hi, I'm Ranger Rafi Wilkinson with Indiana Dunes National Park. I'm here at Mount Baldy on a great day. Looking forward to the Virtual Ranger Challenge. I'm going to take mine right now. I'm going to head off on the trail. I look forward to seeing your comments on Facebook. So we'll talk about this later in the video, but here we are along the trail to the beach, and it's a really interesting feature here. This is the humus or soil layer. The scientists call it a Paleosol, especially when it's been buried under the dune. But what we're seeing here is soil from about 3,500 years ago to the present. And so this sand right here is older than 3,500 years, and it's just been under this soil layer the whole time. And we'll see that that's really important because scientists can follow this soil layer all around this area, and I guess most importantly underneath Mount Baldy that's been burying it, and so they can kind of see and date where they are within the dune at any region because of this soil layer. This is a really good example. We're not even, to the front of the dune yet, and we see here in the forest, sand is beginning to cover this whole forest area, and this is a really good indicator of erosion where over on the front side of the dune, we've lost our marram grass, and the wind is now transporting huge amounts of sand up over the dune and actually starting to bury these trees and cut holes in the dune. We can see all these root systems being exposed, and a really good indicator of a lot of erosion that's happening here at Mount Baldy. So just a friendly reminder here, we really try to do a good job of marking all of our trails, and especially here at Mount Baldy where it's really a fragile ecosystem, in particular the marram grass can be damaged really easily. We really want you to stay on these trails, and here we see evidence, unfortunately, of a visitor or visitors climbing up this dune and actually going up to the summit where it's closed to the public. And so we would just ask that once again that we stay on these trails down to the beach here. One of the things that I really like about Mount Baldy is that it's really dynamic. Every day is different out here. The weather, the beach, today we have a lot of beach, but also the trail, that final trail down to the beach changes really monthly. And so we see here today we're actually presented with two choices. We have a trail that's going to bend here around to our right and offers maybe a slightly less steep approach down, or we have this straight down one right here, which is really, really steep. So a good visitor tip for Mount Baldy, and really for a lot of Indiana Dunes National Park where we have a lot of sand, is to use the right footwear. I always recommend going one extreme or the other. So I like hiking boots. I can go hiking all around Mount Baldy and not get sand in my shoes, or go the entire direction and wear sandals. But if you're going to wear running shoes or standard shoes, you are definitely going to fill your shoes with sand and have to empty them out at the car. Another great tip here at Mount Baldy is how to handle your pets. See here a great example here. We have visitors here. Both of their pets are on leash. They've picked up after their dog and they're carrying out, and that just really is enjoyment for everybody, and it really protects our environment. We have a lot of people that come out here and think that because their dogs don't bite, it's okay, but also we have so many critical habitats out here that dogs will unknowingly destroy that it's really important to keep them on leash. An interesting thing to note here at Indiana Dunes National Park is that Mount Baldy is actually just one of thousands of dunes that make up our 15 miles of shoreline. And all these are different. Some are different shapes, some are long and straight along the lake. 4 dunes, we have parabolic dunes that are formed like this. And even if you were just to go to Mount Baldy and then drive down to our West Beach, you'd see that the dunes look and behave very differently. And certainly at West Beach, they're very friendly towards hiking them. They're more friendly towards going to the beach and bringing a cooler or chairs, whereas here at Mount Baldy, it's a little bit more difficult. So we definitely want to advise people, a good tip is to please come here, bring a backpack, bring a light lunch, but don't plan on bringing large coolers or large amounts of a wagon with a bunch of gear, because you're not going to make it down to the beach. Here at Mount Baldy, I really want to point out some really sort of interesting and amazing things about our park. I mean, everyone comes here for the lake. They know, we have these 15 miles of awesome shoreline. But right here, just in this small little area, and that's what Indiana Dunes is all about, is we have this clay layer 6,500 years ago when this was a lagoon. I take a few steps up. I've got this sand cliff that shows how just the erosion that we're having now, these high lake levels. we see really the importance of this marram grass. We all see it in the summer, it's maybe a couple feet tall, but what people don't realize is that the root systems, the rhizomes, go more than 6 feet down and really lock all these dunes together. And then in the foreground, or in the background here, we can see this really interesting soil layer called a Paleosol that is really showing us that 3,500 years ago we had a very stable dune here, and years and decades and hundreds of years of stability. But now Mount Baldy has buried it, and we see all that sand above that clay or that soil layer is now new dune as it's moving backwards towards our parking lot. So I'm standing here in front of some closed signs here. It says keep off the dunes, and it's really important. We ask visitors to stay off this dune. Again, I'm sure everyone knows by now, we had an unfortunate incident where a kid literally fell into a hole where an oak tree had decomposed, and he literally fell over 10 feet into the hole. Luckily he was rescued, but we have since used ground penetrating radar, and we know that there are now dozens of these holes that exist up there, and that's why we keep this closed. So really we're asking people for their own safety. But behind it is a really fascinating layer. I mean, we see, of course, erosion. We see this, the loss of vegetation. The dune is moving. But halfway through that, we see this horizontal line. That is a soil layer, what scientists will call a Paleosol, and it's basically below it is old dune. It's around 3,500 years old. And above it is new dune within the last 100 years. And so we know that roughly 3,500 years ago, we had a very stable situation here. It was covered, soil was being developed, probably forested, but then beginning 150 to 100 years ago, we started to have a large movement of this dune. The Michigan City breakwall was put in and started starving sand here. We have a lot of visitor traffic up here. We don't know for sure, but we suspect it was deforested in the 1800s, and all of that really led to the dune now moving inward. The wind is consistently covering up everything here, and we've now moved a quarter mile inland. But this Paleosol is a really easy way for scientists, wherever they are, even using ground penetrating radar, to see the ancient forms under the new Mount Baldy as it moves inward. One of the great things and interesting things about Baldy is that there's so many things going on here in just one small area, and from a ranger it could be challenging to tie everything together. For instance, here in the middle of the beach we have what looks like rock, but this is actually clay, and this clay will break apart. I don't know if we can see that, but there's small white specks, and sometimes more pronounced than others, but this is actual animals, the shells from animals 6,500 years ago, when this area right before us was not the shoreline. We were actually in a lagoon formed by a barrier sandbar out there that lasted a couple thousand years, enough time to deposit, and I've seen areas with more than 2 feet thick of clay, and it was an inland marsh. It actually is what formed the Great Marsh, was that area. So one fascinating history of Mount Baldy. The other thing is that I know that everyone wants really pristine sand beaches, and a lot of the time we do have these very beautiful uniform beaches, but we also have a lot of this. This is very natural. So, and this is actually small. We do have some larger stuff. Cobbles are typically around 2.5 inches in diameter, a lot of good skipping stones. And our beaches are a mixture of all of this because of where this comes from. A lot of this larger stuff, this cobble, was transported during the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, by glaciers down from Wisconsin and Michigan and even Canada. And then we also get a tremendous amount of sand that comes down, that drifts down and has for thousands of years along the shoreline. So these cobbled beaches are very natural, and actually when we get larger stones like this, these are very helpful because even large wave action will not move these away, and so this does help our beaches and keeps our beaches in place when we do have a large cobbled section. So I'm standing here at Mount Baldy, and known for its sand, its beaches, and I have these rock-looking structures in front of me. In fact, it is a layer. It is under everything here, and it's a clay layer that dates back from about 6,500 years ago. At that time, there was enough sand out in the lake that pushed up and actually formed a barrier to the lake, and this became a lagoon. Not unlike what we find the barrier islands, say, on the Atlantic Ocean, but here it resulted in this lagoon that really provided a lot of marine life. We see a lot of shells in here from that time, and it's really what's the creation of the broader Great Lake or Great Marsh system that's here at the National Park. and it's impervious to water, so it holds the water in. That's partially why we can have the great marsh there with all the sand, is because of this clay. And this is direct evidence where we see the water is actually seeping out of this clay layer, trying to find a way to kind of get back to the lake. Here at the foot of Mount Baldy here along the lake, and several things to point out. One is when we first started here, we saw this very crooked, jagged shoreline, and that's really evidence of erosion, of something taking place. In particular at Lake Michigan, the lake really wants to have straight shorelines. So anytime we have interruptions or we see crooked shorelines, that's definitely going to be a potential indicator of erosion. And we see here, we should have marram grass. This should be all grassed over, but it's not. And we see how steep the sand is. It's basically a cliff in areas. We can see the marram grass roots. In fact, we can actually see, I don't know if it's possible, but during your hike, definitely look for, we can actually see a section of boardwalk that used to be part of the trail that was carried over or covered up, and now it's exposed. So lots of signs of erosion here taking place, very dynamic with the high lake levels and what's going on recently with the weather. An important visitor tip when visiting Mount Baldy and actually many places in Indiana Dunes is that our weather can be very different. So in the parking lot when I got here, it was 65 degrees out. People were in t-shirts, but I put on a sweater because I knew in just really a third of a mile that I'd come to the lake and I would need this sweater. So a pro tip for coming to Mount Baldy is to bring a lot of layers. You can always expect wind at the lake and in generally cooler temperatures than what you'll find inland and perhaps at your house. So another tip here from Mount Baldy is, in particular, if you decide to come down to the beach, there is really only one way back up. And currently we can see in the back, we have visitors coming up, and it's not for the faint of heart. You are definitely going to have to climb a loose mound of sand to get out of here. So just know that and make the decision wisely when you do decide to come down. Thank you for taking the virtual Ranger Challenge here at Mount Baldy. I really look forward to meeting up with you on Facebook and seeing your photos and seeing your comments and answering your questions. And I really hope that you get the following out of Mount Baldy. I tried to talk about sort of visitor tips and how to best enjoy it. I talked about the Paleosol, that was that soil layer that is all under Mount Baldy. I talked about the clay layer, the fascinating lagoons that were here 3,500 years ago. I talked about erosion, and we see so many different signs of erosion. And I kind of discussed how Mount Baldy is just one of thousands of dunes here, and each one unique, and definitely worth it to hit the various parts of the park. Thanks again for coming out.